In this tutorial, you will learn how to make double jump in Unity. And before I jump into this tutorial, I want to thank Guilherme, Damasceno and Tuấn for donating me on Patreon. If you guys want to do that, if you want to donate, then you can do it on Patreon or through YouTube, and you will unlock many benefits by joining as a membership. Also, I have some amazing beginner-friendly Udemy courses on Unity, so you should check that out in the description without ads interruption. So you can check that out. And now let's dive into this tutorial. Let's create a script for it. So I'm gonna head over to my project tab assets. Let's right click there, create mono behavior script, and you can name this that script to something like player jump or player. And as you can see, I already created a script for it, player jump. So I'm gonna select my player game object in the hierarchy, and let's select this script and drag it over to this add component section in the inspector, or you can simply click on this add component and you can find the script by typing name on the name of the script and then attach that. And let's open up the player script. But before we open, so what we need a reference of this rigid body 2D component of this player game object, as well as we're gonna create a point somewhere fit of this player game object somewhere around here, and from that point we're gonna create a circle, and if that circle collide with this ground, then we will make our double jump or single jump, basically double jump. And if that circle don't collide with this ground, then we're not gonna make any jump at all. So basically we definitely gonna make double jump. So what we need to create a point. So let's select our player game object in the hierarchy. Let's right click on it. Let's create an empty child game object, and I'm gonna call this game object to something like ground checkpoint. So let's call it ground checkpoint, and let's drag it in the fit of this player game object somewhere around here. Let's go over to inspector, and we're gonna choose an icon gizmos for it. Just go over to inspector, click here. So from this point we're gonna create a circle. So what we need a reference, basically we need a reference of this point, as well as rigid body 2D, as well as a layer mask, basically which game object we want to target. So we want to target this ground game object, so we're gonna create a layer mask for it. I'm gonna explain that. So let's open up our player script by double clicking on it, and let's go to top of our class, and you can ignore this line of code, basically these things. So we will go to top of our class, and we're gonna declare variable. So first thing we need, so let's make a public, and first thing we need our rigid body 2D, so we're gonna make rigid body 2D, and let's call that one RB. And the second thing we need our position, so we're gonna make public, and that is a ground checkpoint, which is a position or game object. So we're looking for the position, so we need to type this transform, which is responsible for position, and we have to name it. So we're gonna call it something like ground checkpoint. So let's call it ground checkpoint. And also what we need layer mask, basically which game object we want to target. So let's create a public layer mask, and we can call this one to something like target layer. And also we need a radius, with how much radius we want to create the circle. So we're gonna define that as well. So let's create a public float, and we're gonna call this one something like radius. So let's call it check radius. So let's call it check radius, and by default I'm gonna set it equal to a smaller number, something like 0.2f, and let's close that up with semicolon. And we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our script. And now let's move over to Unity. So we need to assign those variable one by one. So the first thing will appear our rigid body 2D. So we're gonna select our rigid body 2D component, and we're gonna drag there. So we're gonna have the reference, and also we need the point. So just wait a little moment. Once our script compilation is done, we can just assign. So as you can see underneath our player jump script RB, and we can see it says none. So let's take our rigid body and drag there, and we're going to select our ground checkpoint underneath our player game object in the hierarchy. Let's drag it over to this ground check point field, and target layer, as you can see it says nothing. So we're gonna choose our ground, but before we choose our ground, make sure you select your ground game object, ground or the ground. So in my case I'm gonna choose my ground tile. then go over to inspector. In the top right you can see layer, it says default, so just click there and then click on this add layer and name the layer whatever you want. I already created again ground layer, as you can notice right over here. So make sure you select the game object one more time in the hierarchy, then go over to inspector and assign with the layer that you recently created. So I'm gonna assign with this ground. Now the circle just gonna check only for this ground, you can simply say. And we will move over to our player jump script and target layer, we're gonna choose our ground. And now that just gonna check only this ground game object, so or this ground. And let's open up our script by double clicking on it. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna create a bool parameter which will be true or false depending upon if the circle is really colliding with this ground or not. So what we will do, we will create a bool parameter. So it doesn't need to be public, you can make it instead private, but I'm gonna make this one public. Let's make it private instead. Private bool, private bool, and we do know it can be true or false, and we're gonna call it something like is grounded. So let's call it is grounded, and let's close that up with semicolon. And in order to create the circle from this point, we need to move over to this update function. So in order to do that, we need to use this physics 2D. So we're going to use this physics 2D dot overlap circle. So we need to use this function overlap circle, and this function as a first argument, it's going to take the point from where we want to create the circle. So we do know that we're going to create the circle from this ground checkpoint, and we can see underneath our player jump script we have the reference. So let's go to our script. So as a first argument, we're gonna pass our ground checkpoint, and make sure you access the position. So we're gonna type dot position, and the second thing, it's gonna take the radius. So we will pass our check radius, and the third argument, it's gonna take the layer mask, basically which game object we want to target. So I'm gonna pass my target layer, and we do know as a target layer we have chosen that ground. And so this function right over here, it's gonna create the circle with this radius, check radius, which is 0.2. So it's gonna create the circle from this point with that radius, and it's just gonna check with this ground game object or ground layer mask. So this function right over here, it's gonna give a true or false value depending upon if the circle is really colliding with this ground, then it's gonna give us a true value. And if the circle don't collide with this ground, then it's gonna give us a false value. So what we will do, we're gonna store that value into this is grounded, which can be true or false. So we will store the result. So is grounded, we're gonna set equal to this. So this is grounded can be true or false depending upon what this function is really doing. So as you can see, so if the circle really collide with that ground, then this is ground gonna be true, because say this, since this gonna be true, so this is ground just gonna be true. And if the circle don't collide with that, then is ground, so this function over here will be false. So this ground right over here, it's gonna be false. So what we will do to make in order to make double jump, what we will do, we will go to top of our class, and we're gonna declare a two variable, and one variable doesn't need to be public, we can make it private instead. So we're gonna make one public float, and we can call this one to something like extra jumps. So let's call it extra jumps, and by default I'm gonna set it to something like 2f, and we will create 2f. Basically since I just want 2 jumps, so that's why by default I just set equal to 2. You can just give it any number that you like, or how many jumps you want. So we creating this variable in order to keep track of how many jumps we want. And also we're gonna create a second variable, and it doesn't need to be public, so we can make it private instead, and that will also be float, and it will also just gonna keep track of how many jumps we want. So we're gonna say something like total jumps. So let's call it total jumps, and we're gonna close that up with semicolon. And we will move over to this start function. So this start function get called in the start of the game. So in the start of the game, what we will do, we will set our total jumps. So we will set total jumps equal to our extra jumps. extra jumps, and let's close that up with semicolon. So total jumps, we do know that we didn't set any value, so it's gonna be 0, but we set the extra jump to 2, so this one right over here will be true. So that's why this total jumps in the start of the game will be true. And now what we're gonna do, we're gonna move over to our update function, and over here we will check for some input. So we're gonna use this if condition. Let's make first bracket and some curly brackets. So what we want to check, firstly we want to check if we press down space key on our keyboard or not. For that we're gonna use this input dot get key down, and into this bracket you need to pass the key code that you want to check with. So I'm going to pass my key code dot space at the, and then so what basically this mean, if input dot get key down key code dot space, it basically means we just pressing down space key on our keyboard. At the same time I want to check so at the same time at the same time I want to check, so we're going to use this and condition, if we are standing on that ground or not. Basically we're not gonna do that, we're gonna do it later. So we want to check if we press down space key at the same time is our total jumps, if it's greater than 0f, really sorry, we will check if it's greater than 0f. Means we have some jumps. So now what we need to do, firstly we checking if we press down space key on our keyboard or not, if we, and at the same time we checking if our total jumps is greater than 0f. And we do know that in the start of the game this total jumps gonna be true. It's gonna be 2 because we're setting equal to extra jumps, which is 2. So this total jumps right over here just gonna be 2, so it will be greater than 0, means we're gonna able to jump. So in order to make the jump we need to add a force in to this rigid body, then we can make the jump. So we're gonna add a force. So we will go to our rigid body, in our case RB, then we're gonna add a force. So RB dot add force, and it's gonna take a vector 2. Basically you can simply type vector 2 dot up. So we're gonna type vector 2 dot up. Vector 2 dot up basically means 0 in the x and y in the 1. So we will jump in the y axis. So vector 2 dot up basically means 0 in the x and y in the 1, and we're gonna multiply this with some unit, so we can just make our jump a little bit high. So we will go to top of our class and we're gonna declare another variable for our jump. So let's make a public float, and we can call this one something like jump height. So let's call it jump height, and by default I'm gonna set equal to 15f, something like that. And let's multiply this vector 2 dot up with our jump height. And the second thing it's gonna take, so since this is our force, so make sure as a second argument you include this force mode 2d dot impulse, and then close that up with semicolon. And after jumping, what we're gonna do, we're gonna subtract from this total jumps. So in the start of the game we're gonna have 2 jumps, so we're checking right over here if the total jumps is greater than 0, and at the same time we pressing down space key, means we jumping. Now we need to subtract from this total jumps 1 unit every single time we're gonna jump. So what we will do, we will type this total jumps and we're gonna subtract from it 1. So minus equal 1, or you can simply do this minus minus. It's basically means the same thing, we just minusing or subtracting 1. And now we're gonna close that up with semicolon, and we will use this is ground later. So just wait, be a patient. Let's save our script by Control S, and let's move over to Unity. We're gonna take a look on that later. So right now we need to move over to our Unity editor, and let's hope it's gonna work fine. So just wait a little moment. Once our compilation is done, we will able to notice. So now if we click on this play button and then press down space key on our keyboard, as you can see extra jump is equal to we by default we set it to 2, since we want double jumps. So that's why if you want triple jumps, then you can put extra jumps to something like 3. So now if I press down space key, as you can see we making jump, but the problem is that we just made double jump. But the problem is that once we press down second time space key on our keyboard, fourth or fifth time, we're not able to jump at all. And we do know that we just created that is grounded parameter. We're just checking if that circle is colliding with this ground or not. So we're gonna get out of play mode. So once the circle just gonna collide with this ground, then we're gonna set back this extra jump, that total jumps against to our you can simply say again to total jump. So what we will do, we will check. So we will check over here if, so let's make first bracket and some curly brackets, curly brackets. And what we want to check over here, we basically want to check if is grounded is equals to true, or you can just leave it like this. It's basically means that the circle is colliding with this ground. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna set this total jumps once again to 2. Once again we're gonna set back to 2, or we're gonna set back to with our extra jump, which is, as you can see, 2. So what we will do right over here, we will set total jumps equal to our extra jump, and let's close that up with semicolon. Now this is fine. So firstly what we're doing, we're just taking, if we press down space key on our keyboard, at the same time total jumps is greater than 0, and we do know that in the start of the game this total jump just gonna be 2, since we just set it equal to extra jump, and by default extra jump we just given 2. So that's why this total jumps gonna be 2. So this condition over here becoming true. But once we jumping and pressing down space key, then every single time we press down space key, we just subtracting. So subtracting from that total jumps by 1 unit, as you can see. So somehow this total jumps right over here, it's gonna hit 0, and once it's gonna hit 0. So and if we press down space key on our keyboard and we checking a total jumps if it's greater than 0, and we do know that once our total jumps is 0, it's not gonna be greater than 0f. So that's why we are not able to jump at all. Then what we're doing, then once our the circle, basically this circle colliding with this ground, then we setting back these total jumps against to our extra jump. So this condition right over here becoming once again true. Basically total jumps is now to one more time, and if we press down space key, then we making jump, and once we making jump, we subtracting 1 unit, and then and so on. But once we collide with the ground, then we setting back total jumps equal to our extra jumps, as you can see. So now we're gonna press down Ctrl S to save our skip, and let's move over to Unity. So we're gonna make as many jump we want. So you can put extra jump, you can just put 3 if you want triple jump, and if you want something like 5 time jumps, then you can put 5 to extra jumps. It's basically totally up to you. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna click on this play button in the top, and if you're not able to see your circle, then you can use a function. It's called on draw gizmo selected. I have explained it already in my previous tutorial, so you can go and check that out. So now if we make our player jump, so we can see we making double jump, so we making as many jump. So the problem is that we're gonna get out of play mode, and we will move over to our scape. So once we colliding with the ground, then we setting total jumps equal to extra jumps. So we also want to check, so what we want to check, so we're gonna use this in condition. We also want to check if our total jumps, if it's lesser than or equal to 0f. If that is the case, and also we colliding with that ground, then we're gonna set equal to extra jump. So we also checking once our total jumps become 0 or lesser than 0, and at the same time we colliding with the ground, basically player is standing on the ground, then we setting total jumps equal to our extra jumps one more time. And now if we press down Ctrl S and move over to Unity, it should be it's gonna work fine. So let's have a look on this. So we only gonna able to jump 2 times, not more than that, because extra jumps we put a 2. But if you want a triple jumps, then you can put 3 as a extra jumps. So just wait. And now if we click on this play button and then press down space key on my keyboard double time, basically double space key. So let's have a look. So now if I press down space key, as you can see, we making 2 jumps, but we not making more than that, as you can notice. So if I play 1 2, then we not making, sorry, we able to making, because we need to make our radius a little bit low. So what we can do, we can move over to inspector, then player jump script, and we can make the check radius something like 0.15 in order to make it small. So now if we click on this play button, we only gonna able to jump 2 times. But let's suppose you want triple jumps, then you can just put extra jumps to something like 3, then that total jumps just gonna be 3 right away, so we can make 3 jumps. So now as you can see, we able to make 2 jumps only. And if I put something like 3, we will able to jump 3 times. So 1 2 3, as you can see. So I hope you get the idea. So I'm gonna get out of play mode. I want to jump, so I'm gonna leave with this 2. And make sure you just go to inspector overrides and then apply all. If you made this player game object a prefab, then make sure you just do that. So I hope you get the idea that how you can make a double jump in your 2D game. And I will see you in the next tutorial.